Marcos, hi, nice to see you again.
Hi Ollie, nice to see you again.
And nice to see you all viewers. This is one of our question and answer sessions, and where we answer one of your questions, hopefully to your satisfaction. Now, the question today is one that I found that comes up quite a lot with and it's to do with the difference in zodiac signs and houses, particularly in relation to medical astrology. And so, classically, and it has happened to me early on in my career. And I remember thinking about this. And what I don't know is, Marcos, and you might come into this later, whether this is the same if you're looking at a natal astrological chart as opposed to a decumbiture. I mean, I do mainly horary charts, so I'm looking
Yeah.
from there. And obviously, one of the first things I do is look at the radicality of the chart, which is basically how much does it actually reflect what you're seeing in the person, so your patient opposite you.
Yeah.
And one of the first things I thought, okay, I found the first house and the sixth house, etc., where their rulers are sitting. And it's, should I put more emphasis on, say, the sixth house is ruled by Venus, and Venus is sitting in the 10th house, and the 10th house is in Leo. So the cusp is in Leo. So Venus is in Leo in the 10th house is another way of putting it, yeah? So should I be thinking, oh, this is all about the bones, or should I be thinking this is all about the heart as a primary sort of, as a primary,
Why? Because Saturn's in the sixth, did you say?
no, Venus. So Venus rules the sixth. So
Yeah. But why do you say, should I be thinking this is all about the bones or the heart?
yeah, because Venus is in the 10th and also is in Leo in the 10th. So the 10th house, it rules the bones, correct?
No.
So,
Not in my view. No. There are some authors who say that. I mean, yeah, Saunders, for example, does say some interesting things about the houses, but I know why, because you're thinking with the zodiacal malethesia, the zodiac man, the
yeah.
houses are linked. So the
So this
10th
is
house
this
would
is
have an
my
affinity
question
with.
really. So
But really, I think that the houses only geographically locate things. So the 10th house would have
you would
something to
put
do
that
with the.
so this is the thing. So you just say knees around that area, sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So you
So
would
so
never do the wider zodiacal.
no, no. So I don't think
Interesting.
the
Okay.
houses have an affinity with the wider with the sign, in the sense that I think they're just
So we could
geographical.
invert that in that case. So we could say Venus is the ruler of the sixth, and Venus is in Capricorn in the fifth house.
Okay, so in that case, I might think it could be one or two things. You take into account both the sign and the house, right?
Yes,
So and you're really, with diagnosis, things like this, you're adding up testimonies. You're really stacking
absolutely.
testimonies.
But where would you
So,
look first for that?
well, I primarily I'd look at the houses. The
You always
houses
want to
take
look at houses.
primacy over the signs for a simple reason, and that is that the houses change much more rapidly than the
Well, this is what
signs.
I've always thought, and so that's interesting. But you would purely use the houses as geographical markers, not as stand-ins for the zodiac signs that they type.
Well, it depends. I mean, the houses are going to be geographic, and they're also going to have individual functions. So
Yeah.
the fifth house, for example, is going to correlate roughly with the zodiac sign Leo, as you know. So it's going to say stuff about the heart. But
Mhm.
traditionally, the fifth house was often ascribed to the function of the liver, which is more commonly associated with the sign Cancer. So it's one of
Right.
those houses which was often associated with the liver and the heart. But actually, the sign Cancer has much more to say about the liver and the lungs and the
Yes.
stomach, as we know. So, because of the strength of Jupiter and the moon in Cancer. So, let's bring it back to your example. You have Venus ruling the sixth. So
Yes.
Venus is in Capricorn. Well, how would it rule the sixth and be in Capricorn in the?
Yeah, you're right. Okay, that's a poor example. That's God.
Well, let's pick up. So let's say Capricorn's in the sixth.
Yes.
So let's say Pisces is on the cusp of the
Yes,
sixth and
that would work.
seventh,
Yeah,
and
that
we've
would
got
work. Yeah.
Jupiter in the fifth
Yes.
in Capricorn.
Yes.
So and that just makes it more interesting, because we could say Aquarius is on the sixth, but let's just make it more interesting and say by quadrant we've got.
And that's right. And so obviously so we've got, it's in, so hang on. So it's, which house are we in now?
So let's say we've got Pisces on the cusp of the sixth and seventh by
Okay.
quadrant house. So
Yeah.
we're not dealing with a
No.
sign house system here. We're
Okay.
dealing with one of the quadrant
Yeah.
systems. And we've got Jupiter ruling the sixth and seventh houses in Capricorn in the fifth house. So
Yes.
it's just to put a planet in Capricorn in the fifth.
Yeah.
So we could say, because Jupiter rules the sixth house of disease, there
Yeah.
may be an issue with the knees here. Perhaps there's swelling in the knees, or there's some connective tissue weakness in the knees
Okay.
because
Yeah.
Jupiter's fallen in Capricorn. Jupiter can indicate swelling or growth or stuff like that. But we're also looking at the liver, and we've got two significations of the liver here because the fifth house rules the liver and Jupiter rules the liver, and Jupiter in Capricorn is in a fallen state. So we're looking at, oh, there's potentially some problem with the
Right.
liver
Okay.
here. And then I'd be looking at, are there any aspects to Jupiter? What
Yeah.
is the
Cool.
ruler of the fifth Saturn doing? Because the
No,
ruler of a house tells
just
something about the
trying
function.
to fit it, but could you also say, okay, maybe because Jupiter is in Capricorn and Capricorn rules the bones, I should look to see if there's any bone issues here.
Yeah, potentially, because Jupiter, and what are the functions of Jupiter? Jupiter's metabolism, Jupiter's growth, Jupiter's repair. So
Right.
perhaps there's something like anemia. Maybe there's aplastic anemia. Maybe there's a lack of something, some function, some repair of the bone marrow. Maybe there's osteoporosis. I'd look at Saturn. So let's say the ruler of the fifth house was a dodgy Saturn, maybe Saturn where it is now in Aries, and the person came in with osteopenia or osteoporosis. You might think, oh, well, that fits because the metabolism in the bone marrow is knackered. And maybe they've also got some functional problems with the liver, particularly
Just
if
to
Saturn and Jupiter
invert
were in
that,
square.
if Jupiter had been in the 10th, but still the ruler of the I'm not going to try,
Sixth.
of the 6th, you go straight, well, maybe there's some problems with the knees. There might be bone growth.
You
There
might
might
do
be
because it's the
swelling.
10th house. It
You
geographically
wouldn't, you
locates
wouldn't
it.
think, you wouldn't think of other bones, though, because that's
No, no,
purely
no, no. You wouldn't
Capricorn.
think bones in general if it was in the
Yeah.
10th. You'd just think knees or
Oh, that's
thighs.
interesting. Yeah.
Um, but I would, if Saturn was essentially weak, then I might think, oh, well, Jupiter's in the 10th. That's sort of like bones and knees in that area. I'd want to know what sign Jupiter was in. So let's follow this made up chart that we're doing. Let's say we've got Pisces on the cusp of the 6th and the 7th. For the sake of argument, let's put Gemini in the 10th. So we could have Jupiter in Gemini in the 10th.
Yeah.
So we've got a weak Jupiter in the 10th. So maybe there's again some swelling in the knees or thighs. Maybe there's some broken veins because Jupiter rules the veins. So there could be some potentially phlebitis or just blue veins in the thighs. Some circulatory congestion there because the weakness of Jupiter in Gemini. There could also be.
We'd also be looking then for any signs in the arms and hands as well, of course, wouldn't we?
Yeah, because Gemini, the sign.
Gemini, and you might broaden that out into the nervous system to a certain extent
yes.
as well, because Gemini has that rulership.
Yes, totally. So you can look at a planet in several ways. The first thing would be, what house does it rule? It's going to perform the function of that house. So whatever planet rules the sixth house of illness is going to be indicating perhaps some illness related process or some area of the body that is not well, or both. So in this case, Jupiter, normally a benefic, is going to be bringing in sixth house stuff. So it's going to be showing where there's going to be issues in these body parts or with processes like this. So if it's Jupiter and Gemini, maybe there's some because Jupiter's weak in both Gemini and Capricorn, in both of the signs that we've just exemplified. It's in fall in Capricorn, it's in detriment in Gemini. So in Gemini, there might be some weakness in the blood. In Capricorn, there might be some weakness in the blood. But in Gemini, it may be that there are also, so weakness in the blood could be anemia, it could be a lack of nutrition, it could be an inability to sort of repair. In Gemini, there could also be problems with the lungs, not because Gemini necessarily rules the lungs, although we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. It could also be because Jupiter rules the lungs. Jupiter's weak in Gemini. It could also be because Jupiter in Gemini is in the fourth sign from Pisces, which Jupiter rules, which is similar to Cancer, which represents the lungs. So it can show body parts.
Just to so pull it all in for our viewers.
Yeah.
So what I find so fascinating about this, and it's again, as for astrology as a medical symbol system, there's so much. I mean, we've got the levels of that. You've got the significator of disease, or the ruler of the house of disease, and it's in a particular. It's always going to be in a particular sign, 1 of 12. It's always going to be in a particular house, 1 of 12. And there's so much you can read from that, and that's before we started anything to do with.
Oh, totally. It's totally fractal. Yeah.
And so that's just fascinating, isn't it?
It is, and just and to your point, I mean, just to try to give you the viewer and listener some triage on this, like where do you start? I would start with what is the house and what does the house mean?
Yeah.
And what does it mean if that planet is in another house? So if you have the rule of the 6th in the 10th, it's linking the illness to medicine. Now, I would say if it's in the 10th house, in, not on the cusp of it, but in it, that means potentially it's not necessarily bad. It's saying that the medicine may be able to control the illness. And if it's a benefic planet like Jupiter, that's usually a good sign. Now, if it was a dodgy ruler like Mars or Saturn, if they were in poor dignity or retrograde, that might be a less good sign for medicine in general. But what it's saying straight away is there may be now, if the ruler of the 10th house of medicine were in the 6th, not so good, because then the medicine is in the power of the illness. And if you had the ruler of the 10th in the 6th and the ruler of the 6th in the 10th, that's really not good, because that's sort of like a mutual reinforcement between the medicine and the illness. So start with what is the house? The ruler of that house, whatever planet it is going to do whatever its job is by the house it rules. So if it's the ruler of the 6th, it's going to do stuff with illness, and maybe in the context of a birth chart, pets and service people, or in the context of an illness chart if you talked about those things, but mainly in an illness chart, it's going to be 6th ruler is going to be illness, 10th ruler is going to be medicine, and so on. That's number one. Then number two, I'd look at what sign is it's in, and if you're thinking the ruler of the 6th house of illness, that might be a part of the body which is affected, and then you might think of the planet as a process and the sign as a location, and then flip that. Look at the sign as a process and the planet as a location. So, for example, Jupiter and Gemini in the 10th, Jupiter ruling the 6th, planet as process, sign as location, swelling or growth or excess, Jupiter in Gemini, in the arms, shoulders, hands, those parts of the body. Flip that. So we could be looking at sign as process, so that's Gemini, that's stuff to do with the blood, or it could be to do with like multiple things, like changeable things, like Gemini stuff affecting Jupiter, the liver, the lungs.
Right.
So start that way, and then we could get into the Saunders and further into the weeds, but that's enough to be going on with. That is enough to be going on with. And then the main thing here is that, yes, that generates a lot of possibilities. So two things help guide diagnosis in astrology. The first is repetition, and that's an internal thing within the chart. And the second and most important is context. So in other words, you do the workup with all the planets that are doing stuff in the chart to get a list of multiple possibilities, and you see which is repeating, which themes are coming out more and more. The second thing is you have a case history, you have context, you talk to the person, you already know half the time, oh, this sounds like it might be a liver issue. So then you can go straight to the 5th house, you can go straight to Jupiter, and you can look, so, oh, the 5th house is trashed, the ruler of the 5th house is trashed, Jupiter's trashed, yes, it's a liver problem. Or, oh, the 5th house is fine, Jupiter's fine. Like even the sign Cancer, which rules the liver, is fine. Something else is going on here. Oh, but look, the 6th house is trashed and Mars is trashed. It's conjunct Saturn. There's a gallbladder issue. Do you know what I mean? So you can get context from that. So anyway, hopefully that
Michael, that answers my question and a lot more. That was very put a lot of stuff out for me. So thank you. That was brilliant.
Amazing. No, great question. Thank you, Olly. And that please do send us questions and queries and pop them in the comments, because it helps us generate more content that will hopefully be of use to you. So if you've enjoyed this, please like it, please share it, do all the things. Please do subscribe if you're not subscribed. That helps. We want our little channel to grow. So all right, lovely to see you, Olly. See you all next time.
Bye bye.